Hello everyone, this is General Hand Grenade. Welcome to my war room in Prince George, British Columbia. In our last set of videos there, we started the turn phase. There's different phases that you do when you're playing your turn. So every turn you will go through all of those phases. And last week we did the production phase. That's the first thing you do, where you produced your weapons and your or produced your units and you developed weapons and things like that. So the next phase is called the combat movement phase. And here, let's just take a look at the charts up here. This is rank carcasses charts. So here was the production phase. Now we're down here to the combat movement phase. And I'll just hover over that for a second. You can see what he wrote there. But there's all kinds of different kinds of things that you would do in the combat phase. One of the things that we're going to do, we're going to talk about first, and I'll show you if you're playing along with the home game there with your own set of rules, is Section 8 in combat movement phase. And that would be on page, what is that? Page 35 in the rulebook. So the first thing it talks about, and what we're going to talk about here, is declarations of war, okay? Because that typically, like, you can declare war at any time you want, but typically you would see it happen in the combat movement phase, because people might not know you're going to go to war with somebody until you start moving into attack them. And that's what your combat movement phase is you're moving your units into combat. You're going from your territories into their territories, or into a sea zone where their ships are, or where their factories are. You're going to bomb them or something like that. Like, there's all kinds of different kinds of combat. And you can state your declaration of war, or it'll just be implied if you start attacking them. They'll figure it out, right? So let me just read what it says to you under declarations of war. It says, when a major power attacks another nation or their naval forces for the first time, it is initiating war with or declaring war on that country. A player may declare war at any point in which specific conditions are met, including during another player's turn. So, it could be somebody else's turn, and you say, you know what, I'm declaring war on you. And there's a reason why you would do that. I'll show you why in a minute. And there's specific steps that you would take to declare war on somebody. There's a table that they have here. It is automatically assumed a nation is declaring war when it attacks another player's territory or forces, including strategic bombing, convoy raiding, etc. Once you declare war, you are at war for the rest of the game. So you can't all of a sudden be at peace with somebody after you went and slapped them across the face, okay? The timing of the declaration may have immediate consequences, as illustrated below. And then it gives an example. I'm just going to show you what the example is, okay? So what they're saying here is, let's move this over here, this camera, for the example that they're giving. Now what they're saying here is, like, you got to think about what you're doing, right? So the example that they're giving here is Germany is declaring war on Great Britain. But they should have thought about that first, because first what they did was the combat moved into Belgium here. So they moved some of their units into Belgium. Then they tried to move a sub from here, going through here, down here to do convoy raiding on this convoy line down here. And but they can't do that because they've already declared war, right? They declared war right here. And so that means that this fighter here that's on combat air patrol in the English Channel means that sub can't go through there. So you got to think about that. What Germany could have done instead was they could have moved this sub over there, then they could have declared war. And then they could have put that sub they could have said, okay, this sub's going to do some convoy raiding. But they should have done that first. And that's also why you might declare war on somebody else during their turn. Like, say it's Italy's turn and the British can declare war on them. Like, the conditions are there that they can declare war, and Italy decides that they want to move their ships down here through the Suez Canal, but the British player doesn't want them to. They can just say, I'm declaring war on you before the guy moves his ships, and then the guy can't move his ships through there anymore. You know, like it prevents them from doing so. So that's why you might declare war on somebody. It could be for that reason. It could be for a reason like this, like you had a plane on combat air patrol and you didn't want their sub to get through. You know, there's so many things that I'm not going to describe them all, but yeah, when you're playing the game, you'll understand, and if you have played it, you do understand that it could be to your advantage to declare war on somebody else's turn. So, in the steps that it takes to declare war, like it says, you announce it. So what you have to do is you have to take a look at the reference card. Like here's the British reference card. Each nation has one of these. You have to look over on. It's in the questions and answers. It says, "Can Britain declare war on?" It says any minor nation. So that's like what we call the neutral countries, right? You can, but it's a 10 IPP penalty once at full production. The British have to be at full production in order to declare war on anybody, right? Here, let me just show you that. Like that's the first condition that has to be met is you have to be at 24 IPP income. And that's on the chart up there. Right now, they start the game at 11. They have to be at 24 before they can even declare war on one of the minor nations. And they can't declare war on FEC or Anzac because oh, that's Lend-Lease, sorry. I've been drugged. Okay, the Axis. Okay, so yes, once Britain reaches full protection, it can't declare war on an Axis power that has not yet declared war on another nation during the game. So Italy would have to be at war with somebody, you know, in order for them to declare war on Italy, right? The Russians, the Comintern, yes, but only if the USA is at war with the Comintern. So the British can't go to war with the Comintern unless the Americans are already at war with them. And then USA, France, and nationalist China, no. You can't declare war on your allies. So that anyway, so that's you have to first determine whether or not you can be at war, and then you announce it. And then we were talking about this earlier, the consequences. There will be income changes. So when you declare war on somebody, it could be that their income is going to go up, right? And as their income goes up, then maybe they can do something. Like if it's the Italians declaring war on the French, for instance, then the French income goes up, and then all of a sudden the French are at wartime income, which means that they can take actions that they couldn't take before you declared war on them. And so you need to be careful of that, right? You need to think these things all the way through. And this game takes quite a while to play, so if you're just playing one nation, then you've got the time. Like you think, well, what would happen if I declare war on that guy? What could he do? And so you look around and okay, well, they could do this, they could do that. So these are the kind of things that you need to weigh before you decide that you're going to declare war on somebody. And then you determine control and alignment. So if it's one of the minor powers that you're attacking, then you decide, okay, who's going to defend for that person. And it says set up the minor power forces. Like I guess what they're saying here is that you don't have to put all the neutrals on the board. You can just, okay, if somebody's going to attack Romania, well then you put the stuff in there. I never even thought of doing that, but I guess you could, and it makes sense unless somebody's attacking them. So combat movement, that's declaring war. Now combat movement, there's several different kinds, and I'm going to give you, rather than just read the whole thing here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what you can do during combat movement, and I'll tell you what it is first. Like you can move your aircraft, and when they fly, then they gotta be able to land at the end. You can't just fly them off and with no hope of ever landing them. That's called a kamikaze, what we call a kamikaze, and that's not allowed in the game unless you're Japan and you're using a kamikaze. You know, other than that, you can't. You can transport cargo, and that's with a plane or a ship. There's amphibious assaults. There's airborne assaults. You can also transport units from one of your allies. That takes a little longer to do though, because you start on their turn, and then on your turn you transport them, and then on their turn and they unload them, and so like it takes a while to do that, right? There's strategic bombing. There's combat air patrol, and also escorts as well, but also scrambling. Like scrambling is a part of the combat movement phase, but that's what happens at the end of the combat movement phase. So let's just take a look at some of the ways that you can do your combat movement. And remember, you've so far on your turn, you've purchased units and you've tried to develop technology, and then you're starting your combat movement phase now. And so you could declare war, or you could just say, okay, I'm going to do a strategic bombing raid against Japan. Japan will get the hint, okay, we're at war. So I know this doesn't seem realistic to you, but we've got all these bombers and fighters and everything on the coast here for the Russian player, and they're going to try and do a strategic bombing raid against the factory on Japan. So what they're going to do is they're going to fly they've got a heavy bomber in there, and they've got a strategic bomber, and they've got a medium bomber. So all three of these things can bomb, right? And then they have 3 fighters that are going in as escorts as well. Now all of these things don't look like it, but they're all in there, okay? So we've got 3 fighters that are going in there. And say that's the end of the Russian combat movement phase. Now the Japanese player can decide if they want to send up interceptors. Interceptors can only be fighters, right? So if we take a look here, Japan has 3 fighters. There is one right here, and there's one right here, and there's one right here. Now, if they do decide to send up fighters, then they're going to get shots at these planes here. They're going to shoot at 3. A medium bomber is going to shoot at 1. A strategic bomber shoots at 1. These fighters are going to shoot at 3. Basically, they're going to have an air war first, right? So you have to decide whether or not you're going to do that. Like if you had 10 fighters, definitely you're going to go up against these guys and try to knock out all their planes. But like if you only had 1 fighter and they had all of these planes in here, then you would not want to go up there and do that. And we're going to leave that like that, because when we get to the next video, the combat phase, then we are going to resolve that combat. And it's the same with all of these things that we're doing right now. We're going to resolve all the combat for all the different things that we're doing. Another thing that you can do as far as strategic bombing, there's 2 more things that you can do actually. One of them is you can do carpet bombing. So let's say Japan has a strategic bomber here, and they've got a fighter. Now these guys here are in this space here. Now you can go and carpet bomb this if you want. And what that means basically is that you roll 3 dice and you try to hit a 2 or less, 3 12-sided dice, and try to hit a 2 or less, right? And if there was no fighter and no anti-aircraft gun, then there's no defense against that. You just roll those dice and it happens for 1 round and then you leave. But if there could be a defense against that if you put an anti-aircraft gun or a fighter in, because just like a strategic bombing raid, this guy can intercept, but also you can have escorts as well. Now this wouldn't be a good attack right here. Like I wouldn't risk my strategic bomber and my fighter against these guys here, because the payoff isn't there, right? Like you're only fighting dudes here. But if there was a unit there that was a good, or some good units there, then you might want to go in and carpet bomb somebody, right? Like generally, I don't carpet bomb if there's an anti-aircraft gun in there, because I don't want to get shot down. As far as I'm concerned, it's not worth spending my bomber on, right? So that's a different kind of strategic bombing you can do. It's called carpet bombing. Now there's a third kind of bombing that you can do, and it's about bombing railways. So look, you've got this one railway here that goes across Russia, right? And like say Japan it wants to fight Russia over here, but they don't want all these Russian units over here railing across the country to save these guys over here, and they don't have any factories over here right now. They've got one here. So Japan has the advantage over here. All they need to do is damage this railway so that the Russians can't get through. So you can bring in your strategic bomber or your medium bomber or your heavy duty bomber. You can bring it in and bomb the railway. And if you do it like this, then there's no defense against that. You just roll 6-sided dice, and we'll get to that. We'll show it. So you can't defend against that again. But you could defend against it if you had an anti-aircraft gun. Like the anti-aircraft gun gets to shoot, and if he misses this guy, then he bombs, and then you damage the railway. And you have to. I'll show you when we do the combat. But you have to show and remember how much damage is there, and I'll show you how you can do that. Now, just like with the other strategic bombing, you can also have an interceptor. So you could defend with this, and you could defend with this, but it's not likely that like railways are like this railway in particular are so long. Like it would be tough to guard the whole railway, right? To put anti-aircraft guns all the way along there, and to put fighters all the way along there. But you could do it, is what I'm saying. So you could have that interceptor, but you could also have an escort. Like you can have as many escorts as you want. You can have as many interceptors as you want. And the goal is to damage this railway. So we'll just set those guys up, and we'll fight that battle later. Another form of combat movement is moving, like the act of moving a plane on combat air control. Now it goes usually just one space, but like if you've developed technology, then you might be able to go more than one space. But you can move your plane into a C zone to try to protect your convoys, right? Like you could move it into this C zone here, but you have to say, okay, that's on combat air control. And then like you could just put it there for your turn, this turn, and move him back on non-combat movement, or you could leave him there. It's okay to leave him there. But if you do, and then you lose this territory here, then this plane's going to die, because you have to be one space away from your plane. Doesn't have its normal movement; it only has a movement of one, right? So if you can't move your plane back by going just one space, then that plane is toast. So that's combat air patrol. Another thing you can do is convoy. So we've got a sub out here, and we've got a convoy line here, and we're going to say, okay, we're going to attack the convoy line. So what you would do is you put your sub out there and say, okay, I'm going to convoy that. Like you could just put your sub out there and not do anything, but so you have to state it. You have to say, okay, I'm going to try to convoy this line. And so that's what you do. And you could do that, and you could bring two subs in there if you want, or you could bring a sub down here, say I'm going to convoy this line as well. The sub could already be there, but the act of putting it on convoy is a convoy movement. Like you can't wait till your combat phase and say, okay, you know what, I'm going to convoy this line. You had to say during your combat movement that you're going to convoy that. Also, in the same vein, there are to defend against that, you would want escorts. But you have to put you have to state which units are going to be on escort duty during the combat phase as well. So you could say, okay, you know what, this guy's going to be an escort. So you just you put the destroyer on escort duty like that, and like you could do that to anything you want, really, right? Any kind of surface warship. So let's put this cruiser down here on escort duty as well. We're gonna do that. Okay, so that would be part of your combat movement. So there's a couple of things that we've done there as far as combat movement. And these are things, like I said, they have to be done during combat movement phase. You can't just decide afterwards when the guy is attacking your convoy, oh, you know what, I'm going to put this guy on escort duty. It's not even your turn, dude. You can't do that. Okay, so then the next thing we're going to do, let me just pull up a chair for this one. Now, we're saying here that to the astonishment of everybody sitting around the table, the Italians decided to declare war on France, and we don't know why, but they did. So France is going, okay, sure, why not? Or perhaps maybe these guys here took out Romania, and that pushed France's economy up, so France could declare war on Italy. Whatever the case is, France has got all of these units here, all of these planes and all of these boats and everything. They even got the Alsace battleship here. I got that at HBG. Actually, I got it from their site on Shapeways. They have a Shapeways site. So like if you can't get stuff on their website, then a lot of the units you can get on Shapeways. So anyway, I got that there. So they got all of these things, and you're thinking if you played this game before, maybe you played it lots. You're going, yeah, whatever. That's never going to happen. France is never going to have that much stuff. This scenario is never ever going to happen. And to which I would reply, shut up. Haven't you always wanted to be a superpower with France before and beat the crap out of somebody? So that's what we're going to do here. This is just a demonstration to show all the different types of combat movements. So we're picking the French. The French are the ones that are going to do all this combat movement. And we're going to show them doing the combat afterwards, like I said earlier. So, but we're not going to show them doing the strategic bombing raid, because I've already showed that with the Russians, or the railways, or the carpet bombing, or. Actually, I think they might do some carpet bombing here. They've got a bomber there. Okay, so the French. Now, we'll take a look down here in Africa. Now they've declared war on Italy, and they're looking at all the different things that they can take here, and they're trying to decide. So what they could do is they could take this territory up here from these guys, right? They could take Rome here because they've got 3 transports down here, and they got all kinds of dudes down here. They've got a transport plane here with an airborne infantry as well. There's these Italian boats in the way here. They'd have to take those out before they took Rome here. If they took Rome, though, that's taking out somebody's capital. That's pretty awesome. And there's these guys down here as well. Plus, they've got these planes here, because planes in this game can fly over impassable zones, but the dudes can't walk over it. But they could fly over it. Okay, so let's start down here in Africa then. So what's going to happen is we've got a couple of French colonial infantry. Let's move these guys back, okay? So they've got 2 dudes and a fighter here. And we're going to move this guy up. We're going to move the artillery up. Move another guy up and another artillery. So these things all move one space, and that's what we're doing. And this is combat movement, when you're moving from your territory into enemy territory, and this is enemy territory. Another thing that we can do in this game is we can actually attack with anti-aircraft gun. And they've got an aircraft in there, so we might as well bring our anti-aircraft gun in, right? And we're going to bring our tanks in. And we've got a couple of mechs. And the reason we're taking these in, like we're thinking ahead, right? We're going to take these in. We're not going to lose these in this attack against these guys, because these ones here are going to blitz into this territory over here. We can blitz 1-to-1 with mechs and tanks. So tanks are allowed to blitz, and mechs can accompany them, but only 1 mech for 1 tank. So we've got 2 of each. We're going to blitz into the next space here. But we also have these guys over here. Now this is a motorized infantry, and he moves 2 spaces, and normally the artillery moves 1 space. But in this game, motorized infantry can tow artillery 2 spaces. So they're also going to move in there after I throw them over here. Okay. Now we've got these planes down here that can fly over the impassable zone. There's only one border here, like this border here. See, like it goes like that. I know it's probably almost impossible to see on camera, but so that's only 1 space, 1. And also another cool thing is that fighters and tactical bombers can accompany the mech and the tank, the mechs and the tanks on a blitz. None of the other units can, not even medium bombers or strategic bombers, but just fighters and tactical bombers can continue to blitz with tanks and mechs. And so we could also use these ones if we wanted to. Look at there's a tactical bomber and a fighter, so we could go 1, 2 into there. So if we went into there, that would be 3. And then like they're starting at an airbase, so they get to go 5. So that would be 3, 4, 5. We could land here or here. And so that's a safe landing place. So we could use these ones as well, but we have to ask ourselves, is that a good idea? Because we've got lots to attack across the water. Plus we've got all those boats in the water. And so we ask ourselves, is 2 mechs, 2 tanks, and 2 planes enough to attack and we're looking down here. They've got two dudes and motorized infantry and a tactical bomber. So you know what? Let's just bring in let's bring in this guy here. This is a strategic bomber. We can go 1, 2, 3. We're going to carpet bomb these guys over here. So we'll carpet bomb them. And we've got an airborne infantry. Let's bring him over. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we can do that. This plane can land there as well. So let's bring in the airborne infantry. So that should be enough then, because we're thinking we're going to wipe these guys out. Then we're going to bring our tanks and our mechs with them over there. So we'll have all of those things plus the 2 planes in here as well. So that looks like a pretty good attack down there. So that's all the combat movement we're going to do down here. Now these guys down here, let's just point this out. We would like to attack with these guys as well, but we can't reach anybody with them. Like, this is British space and British territories, and we are allies of the British. So moving into these spaces here would not be a combat move. Technically, we could attack Belgian Congo, but we don't want to do that. That doesn't help us at all. That costs us 10 IPPs to do that, for one thing, and there's no point in it. Why would we want to, right? So we would like to move these guys up to North Africa, and we're going to have to drive around, right? But we can't do it now. See, we can't go 2 spaces here and 1 space here, because that's not combat movement. That's not what we do in this phase. That's non-combat movement. That happens after combat. So these guys, for now, are going to stay right where they are. Now, we have to decide, how are we going to do all of this up here? So, we've got a battleship in here, and we've got a cruiser, and we've got a destroyer, and we've got a submarine there. But we also have to look a little further than that, don't we? Let's take a look up here. There are a couple of fighters here, and it's hard to see behind this mountain infantry guy, but they're at an air base. So they could scramble into this sea zone here. So they could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things in there. So we're going to have to make sure that we take enough into the fight, into the combat in here, in order to take that out. And in this game, we're going to do an amphibious assault against Rome, and in this game we have to split up our forces. We have to decide which ones are going against the boats and which ones are going against the land. So let's just move these guys up here so that we can have more space for ourselves. In our combat movement, we're going to decide we're going to bring the fighters and the fighter, the tactical bomber, and the aircraft carrier in there. We're going to bring in the Alsace battleship. That's also going to fight against these guys. Let's bring in the destroyer. And let's bring in the sub. And we've got 2 more subs over here. So you don't have to go from one place to another. As long as everybody can reach into the place you're attacking, then you can attack with them all. So these subs are coming from a different place. We've got a torpedo boat destroyer. We might as well use him as well. And what else? Let's use this thing as well. We've got a light carrier here with a tactical bomber. Let's use this destroyer. There we go. So, now those planes didn't ride in there on the boats. They flew in there, okay? But it's just it's so much easier if you just move them all, if you were planning on moving them all, right? But the planes are actually in the air. So the planes have not just gotten a free ride there. What they've done is they've flown 1 space. It's important to note that these planes have already moved 1 space. The carriers have moved one space as well. So now the other thing, and let's just set this up back here, okay? This will make it easier for us to see. Now these guys are going against the boats, and these guys are going to go against the land. We have a battleship, and we have a cruiser, and we have a destroyer. And the reason we're taking all three of these things is because you can actually bombard with all three of these units. Yeah, the battleship bombard at 4, the cruiser at 2, and the destroyer at 1. Now it would probably be better for us to bring the destroyer in here, and let's do that. You know what? Now that I've told you, that's good enough. I just wanted to show you that the destroyer actually does get to bombard in this game. So we're going to bring the destroyer into that attack as well. So on the amphibious assault, though, the people that are going into Rome, we've got 3 transports. So we're going to bring 2 Marines. We can take 6 things, right? So we're going to take 2 Marines, and we're going to take 2 dudes. So that's 4, and 5 and 6. Now on a transport, you can transport a infantry class unit and something else. So it could be another infantry class unit, or it could be armor class, artillery class. There's all kinds of things. You can even transport a coastal sub. You can even transport a fighter on a transport, which I think is kind of weird, but it's just something that I'm not used to, right? I'm not sure why that would be an advantage for you, but someday I'll figure it out. Okay, so we're going to take these guys into Rome. And we want to be heavy on the dudes, right? Because in the first round of amphibious assaults, as you're going to see during the combat phase, we're only going to get to use our dudes in there and our aircraft. We're not going to get to use our tank and our artillery in there on the first round. We can use them on the second round, but not on the first round. So another thing we could do is we could look at this and ask ourselves if we have too much up here. Let's say you know what? There's a lot of guys in Rome there. Let's, instead of taking this in there, let's fly this tactical bomber into Rome as well. So that's 2 spaces into Rome. Now, another thing we could do is we could fly these in, but so they're at a air base, right? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We could land in southern France there. Another thing that we could do, there's 2 ways you can play this game as far as your aircraft and your carriers go. You could there's an optional role that you could play where your planes are married to the carriers. So these 2 planes that are on this carrier, they're the only ones that could land back on that carrier, and there's other rules involved in that and everything. And nobody else can land on there. Or you can play the way that most people have always played, and that is that you could fly these planes back to here, or anywhere for that matter that they can reach. You could fly these planes up to Rome and then land them on the carrier. So, but we don't really need to, because we have an airbase here, and we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to take these guys. So all of the guys that are in this C zone here are actually in this C zone, but we had to differentiate between the 2. And you have to make sure that you do that. You have to make sure not to blur the lines, because you don't want to be taking shots with this cruiser against these guys. Excuse me, and then be able to bombard against Rome. Like you can't do both. You can only do one or the other. Now it's getting hard to reach up there, so I'm just going to walk up to the other side of the table there. It'll make it a little easier for me to reach, because I would also like to attack these guys. And there's a good reason for that. Like if I take Rome out, if I manage to take Rome out here, and then I also take this out, then they're not going to be able to take Rome back. Like Rome is going to have fallen, and that'll be it. I'll have a chance to hold on to it for a turn, and that might be all it takes in order to keep Italy out of this game, right? Like that might be it for Italy. So whatever they did to piss the French off was not a good idea, right? So we've got all of these things now. Um, um, so we're going to move all of these in here. Let's just move this back. Now, the one thing that we can't attack with is militia. Militia doesn't move, and they especially don't go outside of your territory. Like these are only for your territory that you owned, and they're only for defense, right? There is some of them on the board that get to move, like the Russian militia get to move once they're at war, but they have to stay in Russia. They can't go anywhere but Russia. But the French one can't move. So all of these other guys are going into this territory here. We can also bring these things in. Like we could also take them to Rome as well. Look at, we got 1, 2, 3. How much stuff do we have in there? It probably would be a good idea to go into Rome as well. But we've got these things in here. So let's just take them. We'll put them down here, and we're going to say they're going to go into here. Now here, you see this guy here. This territory here does not border this territory. Now this guy goes 2 spaces, and he can actually go in there because he's not blitzing. The rules say that you can't blitz into or out of a mountain territory, but this guy isn't blitzing. He already owns this territory. If he didn't own this territory, or like let's say the tanks here were back here and they didn't own this territory, they couldn't blitz through here and into here because you couldn't blitz into a mountain territory. But because he's only combat moving and not blitzing, he can go into this fight as well, and he's going to. Now the dudes can't make it because they'd have to go 1 space, and then that's it. They can't go 2 spaces. You see, this is a separate territory. This is Switzerland, so it's in between these two. So they couldn't attack these. So they're going to attack with everybody they can. None of these guys can reach. This guy can't reach. Yeah, they're gonna go with everybody they can. What about this thing? 1, 2, 3. No, he can't reach. Yeah, so French is pretty much doing everything they can, right? And that's your combat movement. And that's the entire phase. It's all about just moving everything into combat. And remember, there's a lot of different kinds of combat. It's not just about going in and fighting somebody's tank or something. There's those strategic bombing raids and all those other things, right? As far as moving subs, let me just talk about that for a minute. We didn't have that in here. I guess we did when we had the sub here. Let me just bring the camera over here. When we had this sub over here, and we moved him through there, we actually, let's just say we'll put this guy over here, right? Now, this thing is on combat air patrol here, and let's say that sub started here. He could go right here, here, and here, because the only thing that's going to stop a sub from moving is, here, let me just read it here. When a submarine moves into a zone that contains enemy units, that sub may decline combat with all units present and continue moving if desired, unless there is at least 1 aircraft on combat air patrol, or a carrier with aircraft. So that's the only thing. Like, it's not like Axis and Allies where it was a destroyer that stopped a sub. In this game, it's planes that stop a sub. Now, the fighter has to be on combat air patrol, like this fighter is. Am I getting it in there? Like this fighter is over here. He's on combat air patrol. Or it could be a carrier with a plane on it. That's going to stop a sub. But he moved through here, and there was no plane or anything. He went, and subs go 3, so he can go 1, 2, and then 3 over to there. So that battleship did not stop the sub. Okay, combat moving into a zone with a submarine. It says when other units combat move into a zone that contains a submarine, that submarine may decline combat with those units, and those units may continue moving if desired, unless there is at least 1 aircraft on combat air patrol or a carrier with aircraft. The sub may instead force those units to stop and engage in combat. So it works the other way around. If you're trying to move through a sub, let's just look over here. So let's say the battleship now wants to go through the sub. He can do that. But if he was doing that with a carrier that had planes on it, then the sub could say, yeah, keep going. Didn't see you. We don't want to fight you. Or the sub could say, no, you got to stop and fight me. You've got a plane. And you would do that because these guys are going somewhere and you want to stop them, right? And that's why you would do that. And so that's something that you can do. But now look over here. We've got now this sub here. There's a sub here that's being attacked. He's a part of this. If there wasn't planes in there, he could just say, you know what, I'm not going to fight. But there's planes in there on a aircraft carrier, so he's going to have to fight them. He can't avoid that fight. So anyway, just so you're aware of that, it's all about the planes when it comes to subs in this game. So what else are we missing? And that's it. That's all about combat movement. So in the net, I'm going to upload this, and then I'm going to start a new video, and we're going to fight these battles out, and we're going to show how the rolling takes place and all kinds of stuff like that. There's lots of rules that are different than Axis and Allies when it comes to combat, and there's lots of rules that are similar. So we're going to find out which is which. Anyway, take care, everyone. General hand grenade out. Okay, it seemed to me that I was forgetting something, and there was, and it was something really important. I just turned my camera off, and okay. You know what, rather than making the whole thing over again, I'm just going to add this on to the end. Okay, so there's these two fighters here, and I mentioned that earlier, and they're at an air base. So they've got a choice. Now, they can defend the land here against the attack that's coming from over here. And one of the reasons that would be a good idea for them to do that is that, as you will see in combat, these planes will, if they get a hit in the first round, they will take off planes. And so there's a medium bomber and a fighter over here for the French, and so that's good for them to take off, right? But the other thing that they can do is they can scramble into the C zone there, and then they can take part in this fight here. And you'd think, well, that would be more important because they're trying to save Rome down here, right? But I mean, if it's a lost cause, then there's not much point in that. Like, look what they got here. There's 1, 2, 3 subs. There's 2 destroyers. There's a cruiser. There's a battleship. There's an aircraft carrier. There's a fighter and a tactical bomber. So you ask yourself, if they were to put the 2 fighters in there, could they stop this? Because if they could stop this, then these guys have to stay here. They don't get to unload their troops, and Rome is saved, right? So you think, well, what should I do here? That's a tough one, right? So you know what? Rome, if they lose Rome, then they're screwed, right? Even though they might have a better chance of success over here, they're going to say, you know what, we're going to have to scramble into this C zone here. We're just going to have to do it. We're going to have to try to stop that attack at all costs, because that's the only way they're going to be able to stop it, because they've got a pretty good force over here to go into Rome as well, right? So they're going to stop that. So anyway, that scrambling happens at the end. And also over here, where we had the strategic bombing raid against Japan. Now, at the end of the combat movement, now Japan decides, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to send up interceptors or not? And then once you've decided to scramble your fighters into a C zone, or once you've decided to send up interceptors, then the attacker can't decide, oh geez, you know what, I don't want to do that now. I didn't realize you were going to do that. Doesn't matter. Sorry, dude. You made your combat moves. Now it's time to roll some dice. Like once the attacker decides to do that and has made his moves, and it says, okay, my moves are over, then that's it. They have to have at least one round of combat before they can leave and say, what an idiot I am for doing that. One thing that's different about scrambling in this game than Axis and Allies is you can't scramble fighters into a C zone to create a battle. I did a video on that for Axis and Allies, where you could actually create a sea battle by scrambling fighters in against an amphibious assault. If these boats weren't here and it was just transports coming in, that doesn't matter. Like the The fighters can't scramble into that C zone unless there's already a battle going to take place. There's already some combat about to happen. That's the only way that fighters can scramble into a C zone. They can't scramble in there to make a fight happen. They can't create the battle themselves. So that's something that you need to be mindful of. Anyway, that's it. Now we'll move on to the next phase, combat.